Welcome, my outside the box thinkers, to the Anti-Aging Unraveled podcast, where I am your host, Dr. Lori Gerber. In this podcast, we will explore the fascinating world of personalized anti-aging medicine that considers the whole person inside and out, and how all systems are interconnected to each other. In today's world of modern medicine, we often find ourselves like just another number in a system that prioritizes quick fixes over sustainable and more natural solutions. Well, let's get ready for a paradigm shift in health and beauty. We look far beyond treating symptoms and aim to get to the root cause of our health and cosmetic issues. This podcast is your go-to source for all things natural, outside the box, and innovative in integrative medicine and cosmetic dermatology. So sit back, relax, and get ready to dive deep into the world of functional medicine and aesthetics with me, Dr. Lori Gerber. Let's take a trip down the real skin revolution pathway together. So this is a great topic, and I'm really excited for this one. I know I say that every week probably, but the awesome thing about as the year goes on is I do feel like different things come into focus and different things become clearer. And we're going into January. We're approaching the end of the holiday season. And the great part about that is we start thinking about getting well, losing weight, being a lean, mean kind of workout machine, if you will, right? But in doing that, our schedule gets really, really busy come January. So the reason I'm doing this topic today, which is why you're doing everything right but not losing weight, is because honestly, I want you to beat the rush. I want you to beat the January rush, all these people rushing to kind of get back to the gym, get back on the weight loss journey. And really, this is a way to take advantage of tons of discounts that we're offering, free membership months, percentages off your first order by getting your information to us early, filling out our intake on you basically had to click our VIP section on our website, right in the drop down. It's actually quite easy. You put your name and your email. You'll get sent a link to fill out your intake and even schedule your first appointment. If you can at least get that link done with your intake before December 31st, it will assure you that you're going to be in for all of our discounts and deals that we're offering before the new year. So if this podcast doesn't tell you that it's important that everything that you've been doing isn't enough to get it to work, and this resonates with you, like probably almost every 35, 40 plus year old male or female, then make sure you get that information into us so we can get you started on optimizing everything. So why is what you're doing not working, even though it's the right stuff? And this isn't just about aging. It's about biology shifting under the hood of the car, right? This is what happens between 35 and 55 to 60. For most men and women, we get a couple of things. Progesterone drops. Progesterone in women, when that drops, we get sleep, anxiety issues, anxiety issues, bloating, metabolic flexibility starts to decline. We also get estrogen becoming erratic. It doesn't just get low, it's all over the map. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But that triggers insulin resistance, and so does low progesterone. So when you have estrogen that goes high and you have progesterone that goes low, guess what? We can't metabolize carbs as efficiently, even if we could do it all the time before that. And then we get, even before all these changes, we get testosterone declines. And we don't really notice those testosterone declines as much as we do when we start losing our other hormones. And that leads to loss of muscle, inability to put on lean muscle, lower metabolism, and just a sluggish body. And of course, some brain things and some night sweats as well. Cortisol gets out of whack, our stress hormone. And when cortisol goes crazy, basically we put on belly fat. It can get high in the afternoon or high in the evening. Maybe it's low in the morning, and that destroys your blood sugar optimization, but it also encourages fat storage. All right. It also makes you tired, and you don't want to work out either. We get these signals, we get weaker in our hunger and our satiety. So ghrelin and leptin, they're two hormones that actually trigger us to be full and trigger us to store fat. So when they're not working appropriately, your biology is not helping us, right? So it's adapting to protect you as you age, not realizing it's actually working against your goals, which is weight loss, not to store that body fat for, maybe a starvation or a lower activity level as you age, whereas you're not hunters and gatherers anymore is really the purpose. It's now working against you. So this is where my frustration begins. Most men and women double down. They restrict more, they work out harder, they work out faster and longer. And it either backfires or it doesn't work. Either they lose weight and gain it right back, or they can't lose weight at all. And that's because the underlying blockers are not addressed. So and the things that are basically keeping your metabolism from functioning appropriately are not being addressed. One of the biggest ones that I see in this post-COVID world especially is bugs. So that's the first thing we're going to talk about. Mold, inflammation that happens from mold, and self-infections. And this is one of the biggest reasons the scale doesn't move. Mold exposure is basically creating inflammation, and that inflammation is creating a metabolic shift where your metabolism doesn't work as well. You don't need to see mold to have mold. You only need to breathe it in, so it can cause weight gain around the waist, puffy face, brain fog, waking up at 2 a.m., food reactions, new food sensitivities, fatigue all the time despite getting an adequate amount of sleep, and high inflammation markers that people can't explain. So some of the labs that we're going to talk about. Now, that sounds like every hormonal patient, right, that I have. And that maybe is the point of this podcast, right? Is that these symptoms overlap so much that really you need to do the testing to see, is this going on? Or you need to get a good history, because mold and mycotoxins, specifically the toxins, block the mitochondria from working. So if your mitochondria are not working, they're the powerhouses of your cell. They're the engines that burn fat and produce energy. If they're suffocating, you can't lose weight. Viruses could we be talking about? So Epstein-Barr virus, which is basically the monovirus, mycoplasma pneumonia, a very common cause of walking pneumonia, long haul COVID. Again, we see this all the time with COVID. Lyme disease, see all the Lyme and tick-borne illnesses, and any kind of chronic virus. I mean, there's a million of them that, we know the shingles virus, essentially most of those herpes viruses. So they can all create chronic infection and chronic inflammation and poor metabolism. So it raises fat storage, it reduces the insulin sensitivity, it disrupts your thyroid, which is really interesting, and it can spike your cortisol, which is how your body responds to stress. So if it spikes your cortisol, what's going to happen? You're going to have this fat metabolism issue. That is why men and women start gaining 20 to 30 pounds rapidly after COVID, Lyme, or other viral flares. I see this all the time. So again, this is why labs matter. We can test these things, which we'll talk about in one of our other segments in here. But advanced testing inflammation markers, mold metabolites, viral titers, oxidative stress panel. How well is your body able to reverse that damage? They're non-negotiables for me. You want to test and not guess. You want to know the numbers. You want to know what you're fighting up against. Unfortunately, the regular labs do not test for these panels. However, we have really good negotiated pricing on these panels that we can put them into place. And I honestly don't retest very frequently, because once we start drawing these things out of your system and killing them off, you feel better and things start moving in the right direction. And we know we're getting where we need to be. So if you don't know it's inflamed and you can't calm it down and inflammation levels are staying high, then it's fat loss just shuts off. It's not going to work, right? We're not going to be able to get to our goal. So on that note, let's talk a little bit more about insulin resistance and cortisol mismatch. So we know that there's things like bugs that create insulin resistance and have the cortisol not working right. So let's dive into that a little bit, because, we know there's skinny diabetics, and there's also what we call like normal or healthy people that still have cortisol imbalance. So you can be thin or relatively thin and still have insulin resistance issues or problems with your glucose. And same thing, you can have cortisol, like maybe you're a high stress executive, maybe you're an overachieving athlete. All of these things are going to drive that cortisol to be not appropriate. So here's the kicker though. Cortisol being high, even if you think you're doing the right things, equals belly fat. So especially the midsection. So anything that drives your body to be stressed out, which we're going to talk a lot about those things, is going to drive this cortisol to be unstable. Once cortisol is unstable, it blocks fat burning, increases the blood sugars, insulin gets resistant, you can't sleep, it increases sugar cravings specifically, which is a big one, and causes muscle breakdown. Actually, it puts you into a catabolic state, but it doesn't break down fat. It actually will break down muscle. This is really common in men and women over 35, even if your glucose is normal, guys. So this is the other thing. Your traditional labs that you're doing at your primary usually will not catch this. It's not going to show an abnormal A1C, which is your 3-month sugar number. It's not going to show an abnormal glucose, or even, they don't even check for insulin. They're not even checking cortisol levels. So for me, again, it goes back to that testing. But some signs that you can pick up are like those afternoon crashes, if you just know that you're dying, or after food, if you're crashing as well, especially a sugary meal, if you're irritable or hangry when you don't eat, if those sugar cravings are out of control, weight on the middle, and of course, waking up hungry because you're not metabolizing your glucose appropriately. So there are a lot of ways that we can treat this without having to necessarily give you back treat you with insulin or any kind of supplements. We can actually do protein balancing. We know that creatine and protein and branched chain amino acids help this a lot. We can do a longer acting carbohydrate product, which is we call it a resistant starch product. And of course, we can test. We can look for cortisol abnormalities. We can look for how well your body is able to repair stress. We can look at your mitochondrial damage. We can also try peptides, right? We can try mitochondrial peptides. How can we put back and repair the mitochondria, such as I'm using something like MOTS-C. It's a great product for helping with insulin resistance and helping the mitochondria to be repaired. So that goes back into why GLP-1s aren't the only answer. GLP-1s are great for this, for insulin that's dysfunctional, maybe a higher end sugar, but it doesn't fix the root problem, and the root problem is that the insulin is getting defective for a reason. So that's for some of these other culprits we really need to treat all around it, because you can get off of GLP-1s or you can whittle them down to a low enough level where you're just using them for inflammation and maybe just some food noise control and not truly for weight loss. And that's the key, right? We want to create good habits, but we want to fix the root cause. And GLP-1s are great for, again, lowering those blood sugars, but they have other downstream effects. If you can add that with MOTS-C, if we can add that with like a growth hormone stimulator to help regulate cortisol, like a tesamorelin, which is a great adjunct or add-on, that's another way to help you get the weight off if you're stuck, or maybe you don't want to do a GLP-1, or maybe your sugars have always been fine. And that is one way to lose weight, but it's not fixing anything, right? It's just driving your blood sugars to be lower, which truthfully you could do a diet if you weren't hungry. So let's dive a little more into the hormonal topic that I brought up right in the beginning, because I think that this is often underappreciated, especially when women hit 35 to 45. I hear this all the time. Men as well, actually, that they get the belly fat. They're eating the same way they used to. They don't understand. They're exercising like they used to, and they can't lose the belly. And really, it comes down to it's hormonal chaos, complete hormonal chaos, especially for women. With men, testosterone goes down. Okay, it's one hormone. It goes down relatively slowly over the course of time. With women, testosterone quietly slips away earlier in life. Then you lose progesterone in your mid 40s, early 40s. And then you lose estrogen later, and it will go up and down and up and down and up and down until your ovaries decide they're not going to work anymore. So that can be all over the map for a long period of time, which makes it very difficult to lose weight. Again, as we talked about in the beginning, and we can talk a little bit more about it now, progesterone is an insulin sensitizer. And when you lose it, you gain weight. Cortisol has to compensate for the stress. Cortisol also puts on body fat, and the thyroid starts to slow down as we lose these hormones. So perimenopause and early menopause are the hardest times, and andropause for men, when testosterone starts to dip, are the hardest times to lose weight because the hormones are fluctuating. They're not stable and they're not steadily declining. They're up, down, up, down, up, down. And you have some that are higher than others. For example, estrogen in the beginning makes you put on weight. It's the squishy, mushy hormone. It's the one that actually makes us irritable and maybe even a little, obviously, emotional. So you get this weight gain, you get bloating, you're PMS all the time, you're not sleeping, you're anxious, hot flashes, no stamina. Loss of energy is huge because if you don't have the energy to work out, then you can't motivate to do it. And then the muscle tone starts to disappear as well, which is a huge, huge problem for metabolism. It is a very large burning organ for us of energy. So if we lose muscle, we are not going to be able to keep our metabolism stable so that we can lose weight. So we want a higher metabolism with that muscle mass. Brain fog. Brain fog is a huge one as well. Progesterone is responsible for all the receptors in the brain. It stimulates those GABA receptors, those calming receptors. So when we lose these hormones, we are literally blocking weight loss. These hormones are signalers of metabolic excellence, essentially. And when we lose them, it becomes chaotic and metabolism is confused. So all the cutting calories, intense cardio, fasting, removing carbs, pushing through that fatigue really isn't enough. And ideally, we want to optimize progesterone, balance the estrogen, put back and support testosterone, strengthen that thyroid and repair it, and hopefully get it a little bit faster. And then repairing the mitochondria is huge. So you don't need to suffer. We just need to rebalance that orchestra, right? We need to make sure they're working in harmony with each other so that one isn't overpowering the other. And that if it is, we just need to balance the one side, right? So it's not necessarily always about putting something back. Sometimes it's about blocking something as well. So that's where some of these peptides, these signaling molecules, play a really good role early on, because sometimes it's hard to put back hormones when someone's hormones are all over the map. So if I can give somebody something that's going to regulate their cortisol and their insulin and their mitochondria and maybe strengthen their thyroid before I even put back testosterone, estrogen, or progesterone, that will help to rebalance that orchestra while they're all over the place, because we're changing it on the other side of the pathway. We're actually working on the downstream effects as opposed to working on the actual hormones, especially for someone that doesn't tolerate it well. All right, so let's go to the next topic. This is a huge one. Gut permeability. We all know that like the gut plays a huge role in everything, right? Inflammation. We know that it plays a role in weight loss, but what we don't think about is the role that the gut plays in estrogen recycling. And I think that's one of the things it just doesn't get talked about enough, that estrogen is completely recycled in the gut. And what that means is if you don't have a good estrogen metabolism pathway, if estrogen gets recycled back into the system, essentially look at it like you're in perimenopause. You have a lot of estrogen coming back and your progesterone is slowly declining. So most of this we don't notice until we start going through menopause or early perimenopause, because we have a gut issue like our whole life, but we were always able to lose weight, didn't matter. So it wasn't an inflammation problem you have inflammation, but it wasn't stopping your metabolism, right? And then you get to perimenopause and you have more estrogen than progesterone. Testosterone is almost gone, and you see this progesterone start to drop. All this extra estrogen is lying around, and now your gut is so bad, it doesn't recycle it appropriately, meaning it brings more back into the system than it should, instead of excreting it and metabolizing it and getting rid of it. And what happens is you actually get an estrogen dominant picture that's basically exaggerated, that you wouldn't have noticed unless you already had some estrogen there because you're in perimenopause. So now you can't lose weight because you have an inflamed gut, and you can't recycle your estrogen. So you're just putting on more weight, more water retention, and it just keeps going. So bloating, heavy periods, if you're still getting them, maybe very irregular heavy periods, breast tenderness, bloating, mood swings. It's like a big, huge PMS nightmare with those fluctuations of those hormones. And you put the leaky gut on top of it, meaning an irritated gut lining that's been there for probably much of your life, whether it's food sensitivities that weren't addressed. So now you have inflammation and water retention and new food sensitivities and histamine reactions and autoimmune activation. So you put all those together. Now, basically, it looks like you have basically a bug menopause picture, right? So depending on where you are in that loss of hormones, this whole picture can be exaggerated. And I see that a lot earlier on in menopause. So even if it's maybe early for menopause, maybe it's a girl in her late 30s experiencing these types of things, there's other reasons to have higher estrogen levels, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And they're going to think they're in menopause. They're going to think that they're losing they should be losing their periods because they're so uncomfortable. But really, it's because their gut is so dysfunctional. So, I always say there's three main pathways that can kind of junk up the system or create problems. And those main pathways are toxins and toxic exposures, which we're going to talk about in a minute, food sensitivities, right? And food sensitivities that are acquired over time. And you're going to see chronic bug, which we talked about. So those three things will give you basically a toxic load. And that toxic load gets so full that you can't get rid of it anymore without addressing one of these things. So over time, you're going to realize that you can't get rid of these things on your own a lot. And then the body gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And you get up to basically your toxic threshold and then you start feeling ill. So this is why the gut before hormones is not a suggestion. Treating the gut before hormones is mandatory. To me, it's a pathway that needs testing for your microbiome, see where everything's at. We can track an estrogenome, which is basically how you metabolize estrogen. And we can test for all of your parasites as well in the gut. We can treat you with binders to help pull these things out of the system, fibers, liver detox pathways, the biggest sponge that we have. And obviously there's peptides as well to repair and heal the leaky gut system, like a BPC 157 and some peptides for immune support and killing off infections. So, we have a lot of options here to treat and test. So I want to make sure that we 100% understand that we have to treat the gut before anything else. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about environmental exposures. So the toxins, that other bucket. And again, we all think about toxins and we think about them in a way that we know that they're building up in this system. We know that I think a lot of us know that they can disrupt weight loss, but no one brings it up. No one talks to you about getting rid of them. No one tells you how to even avoid them. So environmental toxins are interesting because most of them actually mimic estrogen. Yeah. So it goes back to what I just talked about is if you don't metabolize estrogen very efficiently, or you're in a high estrogen state and you throw more toxins in there that mimic estrogen, you're making your estrogen state even higher. So you're basically in a massive estrogen overload. And you're going to feel, again, like you're in menopause. And you're going to be gaining weight because estrogen puts weight on. It's the squishy, mushy hormone. It's the one that actually will make you gain weight and retain a ton of water and make you very emotional and brain fog and forgetful. So these chemicals actually interrupt metabolism, thyroid, obviously your gut and your brain. So it can sound like a hormone patient. Again, someone that needs estrogen or progesterone more commonly to balance that out. But if they have all these extra estrogenic compounds and toxins in their buckets, we need to pull those out. Again, we have to empty those buckets out so that your body can handle the toxic load that it's going to be given over time because we all get exposed to things. So what are we looking at? We're looking at plastics, BPAs, pesticides, herbicides, heavy metals, the forever chemicals, the PFASs or PFASs, fragrances, household cleaners, beauty and skincare, non-stick cookware. You can switch all away from non-stick cookware, laundry detergents, and actually that's a big one. Air pollutants, molds, toxins from molds are a big one as well, and water contaminants. So most of those behave like estrogen, even though they're not estrogen. So we know them as xenoestrogens, XENO. And like I said, they basically can distort your entire body so that you can't communicate with your hormones, between your hormones efficiently. So again, that harmony, that symphony is all disrupted. Insulin resistance, thyroid's off, fatigue, mood swings, inflammation, difficulty losing weight, belly fat, all the things, right? So it makes your hormones really hard, very hard to balance. And we do say too, if I have somebody that's on hormone replacement that I'm not getting to feel better and their estrogen levels are, I'm going to put air quotes on normal, but they're showing very estrogenic symptoms, I will always check their environmental exposures. Okay. I think this is a huge one because paper receipts are one of the biggest and strongest estrogen mimickers on earth. We'll tell you to avoid the plastics and all the things. And honestly, the foods are probably the easiest thing you can control in your lifestyle, and the plastics from water bottles. So, just make sure we're acutely aware of this because it's one of those things that I do believe has to be tested for because every toxin has a little bit of a different way to pull it out. And we really want to know what we're dealing with. Okay. Because it might be that you need a water filtration system, runoff water. It might be that you're eating grains that have a ton of molds and mycotoxins in them. So we really need to know where we're getting these exposures from. At least do the best job that we can. Okay. So what testing do I like to do? Testing is huge. And I know nobody wants to pay for testing. I do realize that it's not the cheapest thing in the world. We do have really good pricing for this though. And I think if you're going to test ruling something in is as valid as ruling something out, but at least do it with tests that are quality. Unfortunately, the major labs on the market don't do these tests with quality, high quality science. It's very old technology. So what I really want to stress is, we use Vibrant Labs for a lot of these, but mycotoxins and molds, I like to test for the heavy metal panels, all the environmental stressors and organic pollutants. Your cells, I want to see how well you're reversing damage. We call that an oxidative stress panel. I want to see if your mitochondria are doing their job, and the glutathione, all the things that detox us in our system, your methylation pathways. Again, all those pathways for estrogen and detox, I want to make sure they're working. And if they're not working, how poor are they, right? So that I can start to help it and beef it up a little bit. And then I really want to know, how is your estrogen recycling, right? Especially in women, because they feel a dramatic difference when we start treating these pesticides and getting these chemicals out of their system. So, we give them liver cleanouts. We regulate their estrogen metabolism. We're removing the exposure sources. We're getting them binders, things that pull it out, fibers and other charcoals. We're incorporating ozone therapy. If you guys listen to me at all, I love ozone therapy. Ozone reduces inflammation, helps with detox, kills off bugs. And of course, we're getting all of these patients on peptides. We're really supporting their immune system with thymosin alpha-1. We're helping with fat metabolism. AOD 9604, great alternative to a GLP-1. So if we're not trying to work on insulin and sugars, I love an AOD 9604 to break down fat. However, if you break down fat, all of the toxins are stored in the fat. So when you release the fat, it breaks open and you have to still eliminate those toxins, which is why a lot of people will get stuck with weight loss, or they'll feel worse in the beginning after losing weight, because you need to really get those toxins out of their system. BPC 157 for the gut and the inflammation, and then some MOTS-C for mitochondrial repair. They're just some examples of what I like to use. So, okay, that's our toxin story. Let's talk to what everybody thinks is wrong with them, which is their thyroid. And most of you are right, okay? Because the thyroid is really a hormone that is misunderstood, mischecked by regular primary physicians, and can be affected by literally everything. Every other hormone in your body can affect your thyroid. So, and it fluctuates a lot throughout the days and months, throughout time. It's not a very static number. So when most people are told their thyroid number is quote unquote normal, they're looking at a TSH, which is a thyroid stimulating hormone. This hormone is actually not a thyroid hormone at all. It actually asks for help. It's telling the body, hey, I need more thyroid hormone. And then it takes T4, which is an inactive thyroid hormone, converts it to T3, an active thyroid hormone, the gas pedal of your life, really. And then T4, not T3, T4 shuts off TSH. So T4 is inactive. So it's never really checking to make sure your body gets enough of that active thyroid hormone. So the circuit is not exactly a clean circuit, and it doesn't work very well if you don't have enough of the key nutrients to make it function. And when your hormones are declining, it can also make it function more slowly. So that's the first problem. Most docs only check a TSH. They're not checking a T3. They're not checking a T4. They're not checking antibodies to the thyroid to see if you're fighting your own thyroid. And they're not checking something called a reverse T3, which is a backup product of insufficient conversion from T4 to T3. It's like a backup product. So think about like a short circuit. If it can't make it, it's going to kick that stuff off. But they're not checking any of these things. So you don't know what your true thyroid function is at any given time if you're not checking these things. They're also looking at them on a bell-shaped curve. We know that bell-shaped curves are fine for the people that are right in the middle, because that's the majority of the population. However, when you're trying to lose weight, we don't want you sitting in the middle of the bell-shaped curve or to the left or low. We want your thyroid as optimal or fast as possible. So for me, we want optimal thyroid function. That's different than air quotes normal thyroid function, right? We want you to be on the right side of that bell-shaped curve. So that's what I do. I will treat my patients to be a little right of center. And I will actually check to make sure they're absorbing their thyroid medications and have them take them 2 to 3 hours before their labs, specifically non-T4 preparations. So not Synthroid. Synthroid or levothyroxine is only T4, inactive thyroid hormone, no T3. So when there's no or there's no T3 in the medication and you can't go across from T4 to T3 because your body can't do it, then what happens? You don't feel good, but your numbers all look better. Your TSH looks better. Your T4 is shutting it off because you have enough of it, but you never feel better. So that's the key to thyroid, is really understanding that you can give back T3. There is a prescription called Cytomel or leothreonine. You can give back T4 and T3 together, which is basically the combo product, like an Armor or an NP Thyroid. They have that in a supplement or a prescription, and that has T4 and T3 both in it. So you don't have to just stick with plain T4 replacement. And what are you going to feel with low thyroid? So cold hands, cold feet, hair shedding are the big ones, but fatigue, weight gain, slow gut, constipation, brain fog, and depression or irritability are the biggest ones. So if your thyroid is even slightly underperforming or the hormones are making it sluggish, weight loss ability drops dramatically. So, we check all of these things in our labs. And, I want to stress that there's some really important labs that reveal why you're not losing weight. That full thyroid panel is one of them. Inflammation markers, cortisol rhythm. You can actually check a whole cortisol curve throughout the day. That gut permeability and gut parasite testing, molds, chronic infections, mitochondria checking. So we can check all these your hormones and your environmental toxin panel to look for what you're being exposed to. Without checking these things, we just don't know. And it's so important just to make sure that we have those under our belt. And then just to kind of put these in there, and I'm just going to put them in there and break them out to tell you the peptides that actually help to break plateaus. So if you've been on a GLP-1 or you've been on a weight loss journey for a while and it's just not working, I always say we need to flip a switch. We need to kind of either get something out of the system, turn something on or turn something off. And AOD 9604, which I alluded to earlier, gets rid of that target fat, that stubborn belly fat, without affecting the blood sugars more. I love it for that. MOTS-C, again, I love it for over 40s, mitochondrial repair, insulin helper, increased energy through ATP, which is our energy source, oxidizes fat, so it helps to get rid of that fat pathway and helps with longevity. And then working on the brain, I feel like if I can't get a woman motivated or de-stressed enough to work out, or they're really resistant to progesterone and it's just not working for their brain, I like C-Max and Celank. I always say C-Max, think more of focus and clarity and ADD. Celank, think more anxiety. All right. So they can be taken together. They can be taken separate, but I love it for focus, mood, cognitive performance, and emotional regulation. Because honestly, once you feel good, it's a lot easier to keep losing weight. BPC 157, goes without saying. This one is for inflammation, gut repair, and tissue integrity. So it's going to help with some tendon and joint issues as well, or chronic injury. And then last but not least, I love thymosin alpha-1, especially if they're autoimmune or they're chronic inflammation, this is a great immune reset. So, and why do peptides work? I mean, they speak the same language as your cells. They're able to literally talk to them and say, hey, turn on and turn off. They're not a replacement. So when hormones shift and inflammation goes up, mitochondria slows down, the peptides are able to turn the pathways back on so that your aging pathways are not turned on as frequently, and it kind of turns that stress and aging down. So that to me is why they work so well, and honestly why there's so much controversy over them, because they do work so well. So, all right, if today's episode spoke to you, if you're sitting there thinking, this is literally my life, this is exactly what I'm experiencing, which I hope it resonates with a lot of you. That's why I'm doing it this time of year. Then here's what I want you to know. One, you're not alone. You're not imagining things, and you don't have to struggle another year trying harder without seeing those results. Because the real question isn't why can't I lose weight, right? We just kind of covered that. The real question is what's going on inside my body and blocking my weight loss, and how do we fix it? And that's what we do at Dr. Lori Integrative Med, because we're ready to help you understand your body, get actual data, real answers, real testing, and a plan that works. And we will guide you through that plan over the course of 2 months, 6 months, whatever that is. And you just have to go to our website. Like I said, you can go to the drop down for VIP, or you can just fill out our male and female wellness intake. If you let us know that you heard this podcast before the end of the year and we see it come in, we will absolutely get you started with some of our discount programs to get you started early and take advantage of some of these free months and free peptides. If you actually put weight loss resistant as well in the notes of your intake, that'll give us another clue that you heard this podcast, which would be really lovely, so I can get some feedback on it. So I just want you to know that we really have to stop guessing. We have to stop saying, what is wrong with me and what is wrong with what I'm doing? It's not something that you're doing. It's you're doing other things right. It's just your body isn't cooperating. The harmony and the orchestra and the synchronicity isn't there. So this is the year that you stop guessing. This is the year you finally understand your hormones. Maybe we turn them back on. Maybe we fix them. That is totally up to you, but we can definitely improve things. And this is the year to get your metabolism back. This is the year to feel like you again, as we like to say. This is the year to age your way, age in the way that you want to age so that you have control over what you want to do as you get older and as your body starts to change. So I thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you for the next episode. Please, you guys, the episodes are coming out every week. So if you could follow me on YouTube and on our podcast channel, I would really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, just send us an email to info@mydrlori.com, all spelled out. And I would love to help you out. See you guys for the next one.